You are surrounded by noise right now. Maybe it is the hum of a fan, the distant sound of traffic, the buzz of a phone notification, or the endless chatter of thoughts inside your own mind. You have become so used to this constant layer of sound that silence, real, deep, complete silence, would feel almost uncomfortable to you. Strange, isn't it? The one thing your brain desperately needs to heal, to grow, to restore itself, is the very thing modern life has made you afraid of. But what if I told you that silence is not empty? What if I told you that silence is not the absence of something meaningful, but rather the presence of everything your mind has been starving for? What if the most powerful medicine ever discovered for the human brain costs absolutely nothing, requires no prescription, no equipment, no special training, and has been available to you every single day of your life, yet you have been unknowingly running away from it? This is not a motivational exaggeration. This is neuroscience. This is biology. This is the quiet revolution happening inside the brains of people who have chosen to stop, to sit, and to simply let the world go silent around them. Think about the last time you were truly silent. Not just physically quiet, but mentally still. No scrolling, no background music, no podcast playing, no television murmuring in the corner. When was that moment? A week ago? A month? Years? For most people living in this era of constant connectivity, genuine silence has become a rare luxury, something experienced only by accident, in the brief gap between one distraction and the next. And yet your brain, the most sophisticated organ in the known universe, was never designed for this level of relentless stimulation. It was designed with a need, a deep biological need, for rest. Not the rest of sleep, though that matters deeply, but the rest of conscious quiet, the rest of intentional stillness, the rest that only silence can provide. Every single moment you spend in noise, your brain is working, your auditory cortex is processing, your stress response system is evaluating, your nervous system is on guard, and when this never stops, when the noise never ends, something inside you begins to break down slowly, quietly, invisibly. Your cortisol levels rise, your emotional regulation weakens, your ability to focus and think clearly starts to erode. You feel it as fatigue, as anxiety, as that dull, persistent sense that something is off. But you cannot quite name it. Now you can name it. It is noise. It is the absence of silence. It is the slow starvation of a brain that has forgotten what it feels like to be still. Here is where the science becomes extraordinary, and this is exactly the kind of truth that Dr. Mindful Shift has built an entire philosophy around. The idea that the deepest healing does not come from doing more, but from learning to do less in the most intentional way possible. Research published in the journal Brain Structure and Function revealed something remarkable. Scientists studying the effects of silence on the brain discovered that 2 hours of silence per day could stimulate neurogenesis in the hippocampus. Let that land for a moment. 2 hours of silence, not medication, not surgery, not years of rehabilitation, but quiet, deliberate, intentional silence, was enough to trigger the birth of brand new brain cells. The hippocampus is the part of your brain responsible for memory, for learning, for emotional processing, and for your ability to navigate stress with clarity and resilience. When this region is damaged, depleted, or under constant pressure from chronic stress and unrelenting noise, everything in your inner life suffers. Your memory weakens, your emotional responses become unpredictable, your ability to concentrate dissolves, you feel overwhelmed by things that should feel manageable. But when the hippocampus is nourished, when it is given the gift of silence and stillness, it begins to regenerate, it begins to grow, it begins to rebuild the very architecture of your mental and emotional health from the inside out. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetic language designed to make you feel good for a few minutes before you move on with your noisy day. This is a documented, peer-reviewed, scientifically validated truth about the organ sitting inside your skull right now, the organ that determines the quality of every thought you will ever have, every memory you will ever keep, every emotion you will ever process, every decision you will ever make. Your brain can grow, it can heal, it can rebuild itself. And the key that unlocks that process, the simple, accessible, completely free key, is silence. Not the silence of giving up, not the silence of withdrawal or defeat, but the silence of intention. The silence of someone who has decided with full awareness to stop feeding the noise and start feeding the mind. That choice, that single daily choice to seek quiet, is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not doing nothing. It is doing the most important thing a human being can do for the long-term health of their brain. It is an act of profound self-respect. It is the beginning of a transformation so deep, so cellular, so fundamentally life-changing that the person who emerges on the other side of consistent silence will barely recognize the anxious, distracted, mentally exhausted version of themselves they used to be. But here is where something shifts. Here is where the story takes a turn that most people are not prepared for, because what science has uncovered about silence goes far deeper than simply feeling calm or relaxed after a quiet moment. There is something happening beneath the surface, something invisible and cellular and profoundly unsettling in the most beautiful way, and once you understand it, you will never look at a noisy environment the same way again. You already know that stress is harmful. You have heard it 1,000 times. Reduce your stress, manage your anxiety, take breaks, breathe deeply. But what you may not fully understand is the specific biological mechanism through which chronic noise, the kind you experience every single day without even registering it as harmful, is quietly, methodically dismantling the chemical architecture of your brain. The villain in this story has a name. It is cortisol, and it is far more dangerous than most people realize. Cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone. In small, appropriate doses, it is useful. It sharpens your alertness in the morning. It helps you respond to genuine threats. It gives you the burst of energy you need to meet a deadline or handle a crisis. But when cortisol is released continuously, when your nervous system never receives the signal that the danger has passed, that the noise has stopped, that the threat is gone, it becomes destructive. Chronically elevated cortisol does not just make you feel stressed. It physically shrinks the hippocampus. It suppresses the immune system. It disrupts sleep architecture at the neurological level. It interferes with the production of serotonin and dopamine, the two chemicals most responsible for your sense of well-being, motivation, and emotional stability. This means that the noise you have normalized, the stimulation you have accepted as simply part of modern life, is not neutral. It is not harmless background texture. It is a slow, continuous drip of cortisol into a system that was never designed to handle it at this scale, at this frequency, for this many consecutive years. And here is the part that should stop you completely. The part that should make you sit with this truth in the very silence we are talking about. Most of the damage is happening without any obvious symptoms until it is already significant. You do not feel your hippocampus shrinking. You do not notice the exact moment your dopamine regulation begins to falter. You simply wake up one day feeling hollowed out, emotionally flat, unable to concentrate, unable to feel genuine joy, unable to remember why things used to feel meaningful. And you assume that is just who you are now. You assume that is just age or stress or the weight of responsibilities. But it is not who you are. It is what the noise has done to you. This is the moment, right here, in the center of everything we are exploring together, where the philosophy of Dr. Mindful Shift becomes not just inspiring, but urgently necessary. Because Dr. Mindful Shift does not simply teach people to meditate or take deep breaths and call it a wellness practice. The core message is this: Your inner environment is a direct reflection of the external stimulation you allow in, and reclaiming your mental health requires a deliberate, courageous, and consistent act of subtraction, not addition, subtraction. You do not heal an overstimulated brain by adding more supplements, more productivity systems, more motivational content, more noise dressed up as solution. You heal it by removing, by creating space, by choosing again and again and again to sit in the quiet long enough for your nervous system to finally believe that it is safe. That is the dopamine detox that silence provides, and it is unlike anything a weekend retreat or a single meditation session can deliver. When you remove the constant flood of external stimulation, your brain's reward system, the dopaminergic pathways that have been battered and dulled by overstimulation, begins to recalibrate. Sensitivity returns. Things that once felt meaningless begin to carry weight again. A walk outside feels genuinely restorative. A conversation feels genuinely connecting. A moment of stillness feels genuinely rich instead of unbearably empty. This recalibration does not happen overnight. That is the suspense. That is the part no one tells you when they hand you a 5-minute guided meditation and send you on your way. True neurological restoration through silence is a process. It is a commitment. And in the early stages, it is uncomfortable in ways that will tempt you to quit. When you first begin sitting in silence, real silence, without your phone, without music, without the television filling the room, your brain will resist. It will generate noise of its own. Thoughts will rush in like water through a broken dam. Anxiety will surface. Restlessness will rise. You will feel the pull toward distraction so strongly that you will convince yourself the silence is making things worse, not better. This is the critical moment. This is the turning point that separates the people who transform from the people who retreat. What you are experiencing in that uncomfortable stillness is not a sign that silence is wrong for you. It is a sign that silence is working. What you are feeling is the withdrawal of overstimulation. It is your nervous system releasing the tension it has been holding for months, for years, perhaps for decades. It feels like agitation before it feels like peace. It feels like chaos before it feels like clarity. And the people who push through that initial discomfort, who return to the silence the next day and the day after that, are the ones who begin to report changes so profound they struggle to describe them. Sharper memory, emotional steadiness that surprises them, a quality of focus they had forgotten was possible, a quietness inside that does not feel lonely anymore but instead feels like coming home. The brain is changing, the cells are growing, the cortisol is falling, and all of it, every single bit of this transformation, begins with the willingness to stay in the silence just a little longer than feels comfortable. So now you know the truth. You know what silence does to your brain at the cellular level. You know what chronic noise does to your cortisol, your hippocampus, your dopamine system, and your emotional stability. You know that the discomfort of silence is not a warning. It is a doorway. And now the only question that remains is the most important one of all. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Because knowledge without action is just another form of noise. It is just more information added to an already overstimulated mind, processed for a moment, felt briefly, and then buried beneath the next notification, the next video, the next distraction that arrives before you have had a chance to truly absorb what you just learned. So let this be different. Let this be the moment where understanding becomes decision. Let this be the point where you stop consuming information about healing and actually begin the practice of it, not tomorrow, not when your schedule clears, not when life becomes less busy, because life will never become less busy on its own. Now, with intention, with the full understanding that what you are choosing is not a small lifestyle adjustment, but a fundamental act of neurological self-restoration that will ripple through every dimension of your mental, emotional, and even physical health in ways you cannot yet fully imagine but are about to begin experiencing. The practical path forward is simpler than you might expect, and that simplicity is itself part of the medicine. You do not need a soundproof room. You do not need a mountain retreat or a meditation cushion or a perfectly designed wellness space. You need willingness and consistency, and you need to start where you are with what you have today. Begin with the morning. Before you reach for your phone, before you turn on the television, before you open a single app or allow the world's noise to flood your nervous system, give yourself 10 minutes of complete silence. Sit with your coffee or your water or nothing at all. Look out a window or close your eyes. Simply be present in the quiet. Do not try to meditate perfectly. Do not try to empty your mind. That is not the goal, and it is not even neurologically possible. Simply sit in the absence of external stimulation and allow your brain to do what it naturally knows how to do when it is finally given the space. Process, integrate, restore, and grow. Those 10 minutes, practiced daily with consistency, will begin to shift something inside you within weeks, not because of magic, because of biology. Then, as that morning silence becomes comfortable and even something you look forward to, begin to expand it. Find a silent walk in the middle of your day, not a walk with a podcast or music, but a genuine walk where the only sounds are the ones the world makes naturally around you. Let the wind and the bird song and the distant rhythm of life be your soundtrack instead of manufactured stimulation. Eat one meal each day in silence, without a screen in front of you, simply tasting, breathing, being present. Create a buffer of silence before bed, at least 30 minutes without screens, without news, without anything that activates your stress response system right before your brain needs to enter its deepest restorative cycles. These are not dramatic changes. They will not disrupt your productivity. They will not cost you time in any meaningful sense, but they will, over weeks and months, accumulate into a neurological transformation so significant that the people around you will begin to notice something different about you before you even fully understand what has changed. And what has changed is everything that matters. Your hippocampus is denser, more resilient, more capable of forming and retaining memories with clarity. Your cortisol rhythms have normalized, which means your immune system is stronger, your sleep is deeper, your emotional responses are more measured and less reactive. Your dopamine receptors have recalibrated, which means ordinary moments carry genuine richness again. A sunset, a conversation, a quiet morning, a feeling of accomplishment. These things feel real and nourishing instead of flat and forgettable. Your focus has returned in a way that feels almost supernatural compared to the scattered, fragmented attention you had become accustomed to. You are not a different person. You are the same person, finally operating in the environment your brain was always designed to thrive in. This is the transformation that Dr. Mindful Shift points toward in every lesson, every reflection, every carefully crafted piece of guidance. Not the transformation that comes from pushing harder or achieving more or filling your life with more impressive content, but the transformation that comes from subtracting the noise long enough to hear who you actually are beneath it. That voice, the one that has been waiting quietly beneath years of overstimulation, is steady, wise, creative, emotionally intelligent, and deeply capable of navigating life with grace. It was never gone. It was simply buried under the noise, and silence is how you find it again. This is your invitation, not to a perfect practice, not to an all-or-nothing lifestyle overhaul, but to a single daily act of courage, the courage to sit in the quiet, to let your brain breathe, to trust that stillness is not wasted time, but the most productive investment you will ever make in the organ that governs every experience of your life. The science is clear, the path is open, the silence is waiting, and somewhere inside you, beneath everything you have been carrying, your brain is already beginning to respond to the mere idea of rest, already lowering its guard, already exhaling the tension it has held for far too long. Honor that response, follow it into the quiet, and watch what grows there. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.